I am here to show you how to blur the background in a cool picture. So we're going to go, oh no, that looks crazy. Here we go. So here's a picture that Balpreet sent. And you can see the toque is here, and there's Justine. So what I want to do is to blur the background out. There's a couple of little things I want to do. First thing I did was I'm going to just click on this little lock over here. There we go. So now it's a regular old layer. Now, if you go up to where the filters are at the top here, you can see that there is blur. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do here. I suggest, so say if I choose Gaussian blur, it blurs the whole picture, which we don't want. And in truth, that's too much blur. This is how it looks normally. We don't want to blur the background too much. I think that's important to say that, because then it looks like photoshopped. So just a little bit of blur I think is important to do, and you don't want to go too far. So now right now this is blurring everything, which is not obviously what we want. So we're going to hit cancel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a selection. So I'm going to show you how to use the selection tool. So it's over here, selection tool. Now I'm on smart selection. I'm going to go with a little plus here. Is that what it's called? Smart selection? Quick selection tool, yeah. It usually works pretty good. If so, the size of your brush is too big, you can use the square brackets, left square bracket to make it smaller, right square bracket to make it bigger. So I'm just going to select Justine here. It's not doing too bad of a job. So it's selected her pretty much. I'm going to go a little smaller on the toque. There we go. All right, so those things are selected. Now, if I think that I need to have more detail with the selection, what I like to do is I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to look at the edges and I'm going to see, I think it actually did a pretty good job. Now, it's going to blur out some of her hair, which I don't think is too bad, but otherwise it did really good. Now, the reason why this works so well is there's an awesome contrast between what we're trying to select in the background, which is why it worked so darn well. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hit Control-C to copy it. And then I'm going to hit Control-V. So what I've done now is I've actually copied that and I've pasted it on top. Ta-da! So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select the bottom layer. And the bottom layer, which is just the regular picture, is what's going to get blurred. But this stuff on the top won't get blurred. We'll see how funny it looks with this thing here on the side of her head. I don't know. We might need to cut that out. All right, so the bottom layer is selected. Now I'm going to go up to Filter, and I'll go to Blur, and I'll choose Gaussian Blur. Now that's too much. You can obviously tell that looks like garbage. So we've got to go a little smaller. You can see this is how it should look originally, and if I just go out a touch, we don't want it to be too noticeable, but we're trying to bring some more emphasis. I wouldn't go too much more. I think I'm not even sure if this is too much. A very small amount is, I think, what you want to do. So this is, I think, enough. That it looks like it's a good amount of blur, but it's not too much so that it brings the emphasis back in. I mean, you might disagree with me and you might think more blur is better. But I honestly think that you want to do only as much so that you can't tell that we did it in Photoshop. If you do any more than that, you're going to be able to tell that I did it in Photoshop. Because it doesn't, even though it does a pretty good job, it still doesn't look quite as good as if she had actually used a longer focal length. What focal length did you use, I wonder? Let's take a look. I'm going to go to where the picture is, and I'm going to hit right click, and I'm going to go to Properties, and then I'm going to go to Details. Now this should show me the metadata. I'm going to scroll down here, and she used a T5i, and she was an f-stop of 20, which is actually really slow. Oh, no, wait. Oh, I'm sorry, I was misreading that. Your aperture was set at 20, which is why the buildings were in such sharp focus. If your aperture had actually been a lot lower or a lot larger, you would have gotten her in focus more. But I see that your exposure time is 1/4,000 seconds, and I think what what was getting in your way here. I'm sure that you had your aperture that tiny because you couldn't get it exposed properly. That's because your ISO is set to 6400. Because you're outside, the 6400 ISO is super high, and you would really only use that for low light situations. But that was very high light. It was very bright. So because your ISO is so high, that's why your f-stop had to be so tiny in order for you to get it exposed properly. If your ISO had been at 100, you would have been able to have your f-stop be more like at a 5.6. So you would have been able to get a natural blur of those buildings behind you. And so that's something that you could look at in the future, is like try to think about, and this is the thing that I know it's hard, because you know, when you're trying to shoot on manual mode and you haven't done it before, it can be difficult to do. And that's why, you know, we're going to use Photoshop to sort of fix it a little bit. Yeah, I see here that you are on manual, which is awesome. I want you guys to be on manual. And that's what Photoshop really is for, is it's for taking a picture that's like not quite perfect and making it perfect. And that's what we're able to do. You want to have as less in Photoshop, the least amount of work in Photoshop that you possibly can, by doing as much in camera as you possibly can. This is, so we made a small mistake in camera, not a big deal. We can go ahead in Photoshop and we can do our best to correct for that. But again, just remember, if you do too much correction, it's not going to look good. And I think this is okay. Again, like, so I'll show you, if I go to blur and I go to Gaussian blur, and if I up that too much, you can see right away. I think you're going to have to fix this little thing on the side of Justine's head too. Yeah, I think even 8.8 is too blurry. Way too blurry. It looks fake. But around this 4 is pretty good. Okay, thanks very much everyone for watching Lessons from Jeff. I hope that you have a good time and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye everyone. Now I wish I had some like music that would cut out dun 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 dun, something like that.